Don't embarrass yourself, you filthy little scrub rag. Step away from my board before you make this crisis worse.
Victor Harrow laughed and pointed the marker at the whiteboard.
You clean conference rooms for a living, so stop acting like anybody asked for your opinion.
Loretta stayed still.
Are you deaf? Look at you standing there like you belong in this meeting.
Laughter broke around the room. Phones lifted. Loretta quietly circled one route with the marker.
Your numbers don't match the shipment flow.
Victor's smile faded, then returned colder.
Now the cleaning lady thinks she's a logistics expert?
He shoved the marker toward her.
Fine. If you can solve this, I'll give you my job.
She didn't flinch. Victor had no idea she'd just uncovered the fraud that would destroy him. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The Halcyon Grand's executive conference suite buzzed with nervous energy as afternoon light slanted through floor-to-ceiling windows. 23 floors above the city, Harrowdine Logistics executives sat around a polished mahogany table, their expensive suits and practiced smiles failing to hide their mounting panic. Victor Harrow stood at the whiteboard like a general surveying a losing battle. Red marker stained his manicured fingers as he drew another failed calculation across the pristine surface. Numbers, shipping routes, and cost projections covered every inch of white space. None of it worked. "The Birmingham bottleneck is killing us," Graham Pike muttered, loosening his silk tie. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "We're hemorrhaging money on every delayed shipment." "Tell me something I don't know," Victor snapped, his polished composure cracking. The quarterly report deadline loomed like a guillotine. Their biggest client threatened to pull a $15 million contract unless Harrowdine solved the crisis within 48 hours. Elise Varden scrolled through her tablet, her expression unreadable. "Legal exposure increases every hour we delay. Class action territory." Tessa Monroe cleared her throat hesitantly. "What if we reroute through Memphis temporarily?" Victor's laugh held no warmth. "Memphis adds 2 days. We might as well declare bankruptcy and save everyone the trouble." The conference room door opened silently. Loretta Bellamy entered carrying a silver tray loaded with fresh coffee carafes, cream pitchers, and folded napkins. Her blue maid's uniform moved quietly between the leather chairs as she refreshed each executive's cup without disturbing the mounting tension. She moved like someone accustomed to being invisible. Her dark hands worked efficiently, replacing empty sugar bowls and straightening already perfect place settings. Years of hotel service had taught her the art of necessary invisibility around important people. But Loretta's eyes found the whiteboard. She paused for exactly 3 seconds while replacing Graham's coffee cup. Her gaze traced Victor's calculations, following routing lines and cost projections like she was reading a familiar language. Victor caught the movement in his peripheral vision. He turned, his steel-gray eyes narrowing on Loretta's face. "Something interesting you over there?" Loretta's shoulders straightened slightly. "No, sir. Just refreshing the service." "Careful," Victor said, his voice carrying that particular tone wealthy men used when they wanted an audience. "Stare at it too long and you might embarrass yourself." Scattered chuckles rippled around the table. Graham Pike grinned openly. Even Tessa's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. Loretta lowered her gaze and continued working, but Victor wasn't finished. The failed calculations mocked him from the whiteboard. His highly paid executives sat useless around the mahogany table. He needed someone smaller to make himself feel larger. "You think you understand what you're looking at?" Victor stepped closer, his Italian leather shoes clicking against marble. "This is advanced logistics modeling, supply chain optimization, corporate-level problem-solving. I'm just here to keep everyone comfortable," Loretta said quietly, not meeting his eyes. But Victor caught something in her tone, a careful neutrality that wasn't quite submission. "No, seriously," he continued, drawing out each word for maximum effect. Do you think you could solve this little puzzle? Fix what my entire executive team can't figure out? The room fell silent except for the whisper of air conditioning. Graham leaned back in his chair, grinning at the entertainment. Elise's fingers stopped scrolling. Tessa shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Loretta stood perfectly still, silver tray balanced in her hands. I wouldn't presume to understand your business, Mr. Harrow. Victor's smile turned predatory. He was enjoying this now, feeding off the room's attention and his own mounting frustration with the unsolvable crisis. Come on, he pressed, gesturing grandly at the whiteboard. Take a real look. Study those numbers. Honestly, if you can actually solve this thing— He paused for dramatic effect, making sure every executive was watching. If you can solve this, I'll give you my job. The room erupted in laughter. Graham actually slapped the table. Even Elise's mouth curved upward. The tension of the failed quarterly projections found release in collective amusement at the absurd image of a hotel maid running a logistics empire. But Loretta looked at the whiteboard again. Really looked. Her dark eyes traced the routing patterns, following the Birmingham transfer calculations Victor had drawn and redrawn. She saw the duplicate charges, the emergency overflow fees, the subcontractor payments routed through what looked like deliberate inefficiency. Well, Victor prompted, still grinning at his own cleverness. Going to embarrass yourself trying to play corporate executive? Loretta set down her silver tray on the side table. She walked slowly to the whiteboard. May I borrow that marker? The laughter died instantly. 20 pairs of eyes focused on the woman in the blue maid's uniform standing beside their CEO, her hand extended toward the red marker in his fingers. Victor's smile flickered. The room held its breath. And Loretta waited, her calm gaze fixed on the whiteboard, full of failed solutions, while every executive stared in stunned silence. Victor held the marker like a weapon, his smile sharp and cold. Go ahead. Show us what a maid knows about supply chain management. Loretta took the marker without hesitation. Her fingers were steady as she approached the whiteboard, studying the maze of numbers, roots, and calculations that had stumped 20 corporate executives for 3 hours. She circled one number in red, then another. This Birmingham transfer point, she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly across the silent room. You're counting it twice in your cost model. Victor's smile tightened. That's a dual root calculation for— It's a mistake. Loretta drew a clean line connecting 2 distribution centers. You're treating this like a driver shortage crisis. But look at these emergency overflow fees. Her marker traced a pattern across the board, connecting dots that suddenly formed a clear picture. Someone is routing your high-value shipments through Birmingham on purpose, making them late. Then charging emergency fees when a preferred subcontractor has to handle the overflow. The room stirred. Graham Pike leaned forward, his smirk fading. Tessa Monroe opened her laptop. That's not— Victor started, but Loretta continued, her voice growing more confident. Your Memphis hub has capacity. Your drivers are available. The bottleneck is artificial. She tapped the Birmingham routing charges with the marker. These numbers don't match your fleet utilization reports. Someone is deliberately slowing your freight to trigger penalty payments. Victor stepped closer, his face darkening. You have no idea what you're— Reroute through Memphis for 48 hours, Loretta interrupted, her tone precise and professional. Audit Birmingham manually. Freeze all subcontractor overflow payments until you verify the discrepancies. Silence stretched across the conference room like a held breath. Tessa's fingers flew across her keyboard. Numbers flashed on her screen. Her eyes widened. She's right, Tessa whispered, then louder. The Memphis capacity is there. Birmingham is showing artificial delays. The overflow charges— She looked up, stunned. This would save the quarter. The executive stared at Loretta with new eyes. Not a maid holding a marker. A woman who had just solved their unsolvable crisis in under 5 minutes. Victor's jaw clenched. His humiliation was visible now, red creeping up his neck above his expensive collar. "How does a hotel maid know logistics modeling?" Graham demanded. Loretta set down the marker carefully. "I was a financial systems analyst for 11 years. I built cost control models for regional freight companies before I left to care for my mother." The room shifted. The uniform that had made her invisible now felt like a disguise. Every executive suddenly understood they had been sitting next to brilliance disguised as service. "You said if I solved it, you'd give me your job," Loretta said quietly, meeting Victor's furious gaze. Victor stepped close enough that only she could hear his next words. His voice was soft as silk and sharp as broken glass. "You should have stayed quiet." Victor's eyes never left Loretta's face as he reached for his phone. The conference room had fallen silent, every executive watching the tension crackle between the CEO and the woman who had just made him look like a fool. "Dennis," Victor said into his phone, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made people jump. "I need you in Conference Suite A. Immediately." Loretta stood perfectly still beside the whiteboard, her marker still in hand. The equations she had corrected surrounded her like evidence of Victor's incompetence. She could feel the weight of every stare in the room. Dennis Calder appeared in the doorway within 2 minutes, slightly out of breath. His thin face was already creased with worry lines, and his cheap tie was askew. He looked like a man who spent most of his time apologizing for things that weren't his fault. "Mr. Harrow," Dennis said, smoothing his tie nervously, "is everything. This employee has disrupted a confidential corporate meeting." Victor cut him off, his voice ice-cold. "She has accessed proprietary business information and created an unacceptable situation." Dennis's eyes darted between Victor and Loretta. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand." "She was serving coffee," Graham Pike added helpfully, his voice dripping with malice. "Then she decided to give us a business lecture." "I solved the problem you couldn't," Loretta said quietly, her dignity intact despite the humiliation burning in her chest. Victor's face flushed darker. "You eavesdropped on confidential discussions. You violated guest privacy. You need to be removed from this property immediately." Dennis looked panicked. His hands fluttered nervously at his sides. Harrowdine's corporate retreats brought in more money than the hotel made from 3 months of regular bookings. Losing Victor's business would mean layoffs, budget cuts, maybe even his own job. "Mrs. Bellamy," Dennis said, his voice apologetic but firm, "I'm afraid I have to ask you to return your badge and collect your things." The words hit Loretta like a physical blow. She had worked at the Halcyon Grand for 3 years. She had never missed a shift, never received a complaint, never caused trouble. She had been invisible and grateful, exactly the way they wanted her. "You're firing me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the shock. "I'm sorry," Dennis said, though his apology was directed more at Victor than at her. "Corporate policy requires immediate termination for violating guest confidentiality." "She didn't violate anything," Tessa Monroe said suddenly from across the room. "She was invited to participate." Victor whirled on her. She was not invited. She was told to mind her own business. "You dared her to solve the problem," Tessa continued, her voice growing stronger. "You said you'd give her your job if she could do it." "That was obviously a joke," Graham Pike sneered. "No one seriously thought a maid could." "She solved it better than any of us," Tessa shot back. Victor's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Dennis, remove her. Now. Or Harrowdine will find a hotel that understands proper service." Dennis's shoulders sagged in defeat. His career, his mortgage, his daughter's college fund, everything hung on keeping Victor happy. Mrs. Bellamy, please surrender your badge. Loretta looked around the room one more time. At the executives who had laughed at her uniform. At the whiteboard where her solution still shone like truth in a room full of lies. At Dennis, who knew she was being wronged but lacked the courage to defend her. She unpinned her badge and placed it on the conference table. "You should be grateful," Victor said, his voice carrying a threat wrapped in false concern. "Any job at all is more than most people like you deserve." The words were designed to break her, to make her small and frightened and silent. Instead, Loretta straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly. "People like me built everything you profit from," she said quietly. "Remember that when your house of cards falls down." Behind Victor's shoulder, almost hidden by the cluster of executives, Tessa Monroe held her phone steady. The red recording light blinked silently, capturing every cruel word, every cowardly decision, every moment of injustice. Loretta turned and walked toward the door, her steps measured and dignified. She would not run. She would not cry. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. The service corridor felt colder than the conference room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Loretta gathered her cleaning supplies and changed out of her uniform. Her hands shook slightly as she folded the blue dress and placed it in her bag. But her face remained calm. Footsteps echoed behind her. Loretta turned to see Tessa Monroe approaching, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Mrs. Bellamy," Tessa said softly, "I'm sorry about what just happened. It was wrong." Loretta nodded, but said nothing. What was there to say? Another day. Another injustice. The world kept spinning. "I recorded it," Tessa whispered, holding up her phone. "Everything. His dare, your solution, the firing. All of it." She pressed a business card into Loretta's hand. "My number's on there. What they did to you. It's not right. And what you found on that whiteboard. I think you exposed something much bigger than one arrogant CEO." Loretta looked at the card, then at Tessa's earnest young face. "I just want my record cleared. I want the truth in my file." "Mrs. Bellamy," Tessa said urgently, "I don't think you understand. Those routing discrepancies you identified? The emergency fees? That's not incompetence. That's fraud." The hotel's back door opened with a harsh squeal of hinges. Cold evening air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust from the busy street beyond. Loretta pulled her coat tighter and stepped into the gathering darkness. She clutched her uniform bag in one hand and Tessa's business card in the other, walking away from the only job that had kept her family afloat. The city lights blurred slightly, but she refused to let the tears fall. Not yet. Not where they could see. Loretta's apartment felt smaller than usual when she pushed through the front door. The narrow hallway led past peeling wallpaper and a radiator that clanked like an angry ghost. But the kitchen smelled like home, cinnamon and coffee, and the lavender soap Naomi used on the dishes. "Mama?" Naomi's voice carried from the kitchen. "That you?" "It's me, baby." Loretta dropped her uniform bag by the door and hung her coat on the hook that had been loose for 3 months. Her reflection caught in the hallway mirror. Tired eyes, shoulders that carried too much weight, but still standing. Still here. Naomi appeared in the kitchen doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. At 23, she had Loretta's sharp intelligence and her father's stubborn chin. Law school had made her even more direct than usual. "You're home early," Naomi said, then noticed her mother's expression. "What happened?" Loretta sank into one of the mismatched kitchen chairs. The table was small, scarred wood that had come from a thrift store 5 years ago. But it was theirs. "I got fired?" Naomi's hands stilled on the towel. "What? Why? You're the best employee they have." The kettle started whistling. Naomi turned off the burner and poured hot water over tea bags, her movements sharp with anger. She set a steaming mug in front of Loretta and sat down across from her. "Tell me everything." So Loretta did. She described the conference room filled with expensive suits and cruel laughter. Victor's challenge. The whiteboard covered with failed calculations. The moment she asked for the marker and the silence that followed. Naomi's eyes grew wider with each detail. "You solved their logistics crisis? In front of everyone?" It wasn't that complicated. They were treating a routing bottleneck like a driver shortage. Simple mistake. Simple for you, maybe. Naomi leaned forward. "Then what happened?" Loretta continued. Victor's humiliation turning to rage. The hotel manager's cowardice. The firing that felt like a public execution. When she finished, Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Then she exploded. "That racist piece of garbage. He mocked you. You proved him wrong, and he fired you for it?" Naomi jumped up and started pacing the small kitchen. "Where's the video? We're posting it tonight. I'll blast it on every platform I can find." "Wait, baby. Just wait." "Wait for what? For him to destroy more lives? For us to understand what we're really dealing with." Loretta pulled out Tessa's business card. "I need to call Milton first." Milton Reese had worked the night audit at 3 different hotels over 20 years. Before that, he'd been a corporate accountant until the company pension scandal in the 90s taught him that loyalty was a luxury working people couldn't afford. He lived 2 blocks away in a basement apartment and still helped Loretta with complicated tax forms every spring. He answered on the second ring. "Loretta? You calling kind of late? I need your eyes on some numbers, Milton. Can you come over?" "Course I can. You sound worried." "I am." 20 minutes later, Milton knocked softly on the door. He was a thin man with careful hands and wire-rimmed glasses that he cleaned obsessively. He carried an old leather briefcase that contained more useful tools than most people's entire offices. "What's this about, Loretta?" She showed him Tessa's photos of the whiteboard. Milton put on his reading glasses and spread the images across the kitchen table. He pulled out a calculator that looked older than Naomi. "These are Harrow-Dines numbers? Internal logistics. The CEO couldn't solve a crisis, so he mocked me and dared me to try." Milton studied the photos for several minutes, occasionally tapping numbers into his calculator. His expression grew more serious with each calculation. "Loretta, this Birmingham routing issue you identified? These aren't duplicate charges. They're disguised vendor payments." "What do you mean?" Milton circled several numbers with a pencil. "See these emergency overflow fees? They're going to Pike Meridian Solutions. Same ownership structure as one of their executives. I'd bet money on it. And these transfer charges—" He paused, calculating again. "These look like pension fund distributions being moved through fake subcontractor expenses." Naomi stopped pacing. "That's fraud." "That's felony fraud," Milton corrected. "Multiple counts. Involving federal pension regulations." Loretta felt something cold settle in her stomach. Victor wasn't embarrassed because I solved his puzzle. He was terrified because I exposed his crimes. "That's exactly right." Milton looked up from the numbers. "No wonder he fired you so fast. You didn't just embarrass him. You threatened his entire operation." Across town at the Halcyon Grand, Victor Harrow sat in his hotel suite with Graham Pike and a bottle of expensive whiskey that wasn't helping his mood. "The maid saw the Birmingham routing," Victor said for the 3rd time. "She connected the overflow fees to the inventory delays." Graham shifted nervously in his chair. "So what? She's fired. No one's going to believe a disgruntled hotel worker over a Fortune 500 CEO. She's not just any hotel worker. She used to be a systems analyst. She knows what she saw. Then we make sure no one else sees it." Graham pulled out his phone. "I'll call Dennis and have him scrub the conference room records. Security footage, meeting notes, everything. And the maid? I've got contacts at every major hotel chain in the city. One phone call and she'll never work hospitality again. Victor nodded slowly. Do it. All of it. Before morning. Back in Loretta's kitchen, Milton was still working through the numbers when Naomi suddenly grabbed her laptop. We're saving everything. Right now. She connected her phone to the computer and started downloading Tessa's photos and video. One copy to the cloud. One to an external drive. One to... She paused, thinking. Make it 3 drives, Loretta said quietly. And send copies to your school email account, too. Milton looked up from his calculations. You expecting them to come after this evidence? I'm expecting them to try. Naomi worked quickly, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The small kitchen filled with the soft clicking of keys and the whir of the laptop's fan. Outside, the city hummed with late evening traffic and distant sirens. When she finished, Naomi held up 3 small drives. Done. Victor Harrow can try to erase history, but he can't erase these. Loretta took one of the drives and held it up to the light. Such a small thing to hold so much truth. Now what? Naomi asked. Now we figure out how to use it. The next morning, Loretta stood outside the Halcyon Grand's employee entrance, watching other workers badge in for their shifts. The autumn air cut through her jacket, and she pulled it tighter as she approached the security desk. I need to speak with Dennis Calder about my final check, she told the guard. The man looked uncomfortable. Mr. Calder isn't available. He said to give you this. He handed her an envelope. Inside was her final paycheck, short 2 days' pay, and a copy of her personnel record. Where it once read, Employee in good standing, new text had been added in red ink. Terminated for misconduct. Disruption of guest services. There's been a mistake, Loretta said. I need to speak with management. Ma'am, you're not allowed on the property. Mr. Calder's orders. Loretta stared at the altered record. Yesterday she had been a model employee. Today she was marked as a troublemaker. The lie sat there in official typeface, ready to follow her anywhere she applied. She walked to her car with steady steps, refusing to let the security cameras capture her defeat. 2 hours later, she sat in the lobby of the Meridian Hotel, waiting to speak with their housekeeping supervisor. The woman emerged from her office with a tight smile. Ms. Bellamy? I'm sorry, but we've decided to go with another candidate. I haven't interviewed yet. We've already filled the position. Thank you for your interest. Loretta knew the woman was lying. The job posting was still active online. At the Grand Plaza Hotel, the same thing happened. The manager was polite but firm. We'll keep your application on file. But Loretta saw him tear it up the moment she left. By noon, she was sitting in her car outside the third hotel, hands shaking as she called Naomi. They're blacklisting me, she said when her daughter answered. Every hotel in the city. Someone's making calls before I even walk in the door. Naomi's voice turned sharp with anger. That's illegal retaliation, Mom. We need to document everything. How do you prove phone calls that never happened? We start with what we can prove. Come home. We're filing a formal complaint. That afternoon, Loretta sat at her kitchen table with Naomi, drafting a letter to the hotel ownership company. Milton had brought over a legal pad and was helping them organize the timeline. Write down every hotel, every rejection, every conversation, he advised. Date, time, name of who you spoke with. Make them prove this isn't coordinated. Naomi's phone buzzed. She frowned as she read. Mom, you need to see this. The article was on citybusinessdaily.com, a local business blog that usually covered restaurant openings and real estate deals. The headline read, Disgruntled Hotel Worker Disrupts Corporate Retreat. Loretta read the anonymous piece with growing horror. It described her as an unidentified service employee who had violated guest privacy by inserting herself into confidential business discussions. The article claimed she had attempted to embarrass visiting executives and was rightfully terminated for unprofessional conduct. No names were mentioned, but anyone who knew about yesterday's incident would recognize the story. "This is character assassination," Naomi said, pacing the small kitchen. "They're painting you as some kind of troublemaker who deserved to be fired." Loretta's phone started buzzing with text messages. Church friends asking if she was okay. Neighbors wondering what they'd heard. Her landlord's voicemail was blunt. "Rent's due Monday. No extensions this month." By evening, Naomi had traced the article's digital footprints. "Look at this, Mom." The piece was shared 16 times in the first hour, all by accounts connected to Maven Strategies, a public relations firm. Guess who their biggest client is? Harrowdine Logistics. Exactly. Victor's people planted this story and made sure it spread. Loretta sank into her chair, feeling the weight of what she was up against. Victor Harrow wasn't just protecting his reputation. He was systematically destroying hers. The blacklisting, the planted article, the altered personnel record, it was all designed to make her unemployable and desperate. "He wants me poor," she said quietly. "He wants me ashamed. He wants me to disappear. Are you going to let him?" Loretta looked at the planted article one more time, then set down her phone and reached for the notebook Milton had brought. She opened it to the first page and wrote in careful letters, "Day 1 after being fired for telling the truth." Loretta woke before dawn, her body trained by years of hotel shifts to rise in darkness. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of Naomi's laptop charging on the kitchen counter. Her daughter had stayed up late, researching employment law and printing job applications from every hotel, office building, and cleaning service within 30 miles. "Morning, baby," Loretta said softly as Naomi emerged from her bedroom, already dressed in her ride-share uniform. "I've got 17 applications printed and organized by distance from here." Naomi set a stack of papers beside Loretta's coffee cup. Front desk, housekeeping, night audit, even some office cleaning contracts. Loretta spread the applications across the small table, next to the growing pile of evidence she'd been organizing since yesterday. Photos of the whiteboard, screenshots of the planted article, a timeline of every rejection. The two piles represented her two choices: find new work or fight the old battle. "You don't have to choose between them," Naomi said, reading her expression. "Apply for jobs. Build the case. Do both." "Smart girl." Loretta kissed her daughter's forehead. "Drive safe today." After Naomi left, Loretta began making calls. The first 3 went well. The Meridian Resort needed housekeeping staff immediately. The downtown Marriott was hiring night auditors. A medical office building wanted someone for evening cleaning. Then came the reference checks. The Meridian called back within an hour. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Bellamy. The position has been filled." The Marriott's tone was cooler. "We've decided to promote from within." The medical building didn't bother with politeness. "Your previous employer raised concerns about reliability." By noon, Loretta had been rejected by 6 potential employers. Each one had been eager to hire her until they called Halcyon Grand. Milton arrived as she was hanging up from the 7th rejection, carrying a manila folder thick with papers. At 68, he moved carefully but purposefully, his accountant's mind still sharp despite his retired status. "Brought you something interesting," he said, settling into the kitchen chair across from her. "Public financial reports from Harrowdine. Thought we should compare them to what you remember from that whiteboard." Milton spread quarterly reports, SEC filings, and vendor payment summaries across the table. His reading glasses caught the afternoon light as he ran his finger down columns of numbers. "Look at this," he said, tapping a line item. "Emergency routing fees paid to Pike Meridian Solutions. $47,000 in January, $62,000 in February, and $89,000 in March. All for Birmingham overflow management. Loretta leaned closer. Pike? Like Graham Pike? That's what I thought, too. Milton pulled out another sheet. So I had Naomi run the business records last night. Pike Meridian Solutions is registered to a Marcus Pike. Same address as Graham Pike's home. Family? Brother-in-law, according to the marriage license records. Graham Pike married Marcus Pike's sister 3 years ago. Loretta felt the first spark of real hope since losing her job. So, Graham's family company gets paid every time there's an emergency routing crisis? And guess who decides when there's a crisis? Milton's smile was grim. The operations chief. Graham Pike himself. The pattern was suddenly clear. Graham deliberately created bottlenecks in Birmingham, forcing expensive emergency routing through his brother-in-law's company. The more chaos he caused, the more money flowed to his family. Victor either knew and approved, or was too arrogant to notice his operations chief was stealing from him. Loretta's phone buzzed. Dennis Calder's name appeared on the screen. Mrs. Bellamy? His voice was tight, uncomfortable. I need to ask you to stop calling the hotel. The ownership company has been very clear about maintaining distance from this situation. Mr. Calder, I just need you to correct my personnel record. It says I was fired for misconduct, but you know that's not true. I can't change anything in your file. Can't or won't? A long pause. Then Dennis's voice cracked slightly. Look, I've got lawyers from Harrowdine calling me twice a day. They've made it very clear that cooperating with you in any way would be problematic for the hotel's relationship with their company. There it was, the admission she needed. Harrowdine's lawyers were actively pressuring the hotel to maintain the false narrative. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Calder. Mrs. Bellamy, The line went dead. He'd hung up, probably realizing he'd said too much. Loretta set down the phone and looked at Milton's evidence, then at her stack of rejection letters. Victor wasn't just protecting his reputation anymore. He was systematically destroying hers, while his own company hemorrhaged money through Graham's fraud. She'd spent 2 days trying to find another job, hoping this would blow over. But Victor's campaign was too thorough, too organized. Every day she waited was another day for him to cover his tracks and spread more lies. Milton, she said quietly, I need to talk to Victor Harrow. The old accountant raised his eyebrows. You sure about that? Loretta gathered the Pike Meridian documents and tucked them into her purse. He fired me to shut me up. Now he's blacklisting me to keep me down. But he made one mistake. What's that? He thinks I'm still just a maid who got lucky. She stood and reached for her coat. Time to show him what a financial systems analyst looks like when she's angry. Harrowdine headquarters rose from downtown's business district like a glass monument to corporate power. 37 floors of steel and ambition, with Victor Harrow's name etched in gold letters across the entrance. Loretta stood on the sidewalk, smoothing her navy church dress and adjusting the folder under her arm. The lobby stretched before her like a cathedral of marble and money. Executive assistants clicked past in designer heels. Men in $1,000 suits talked loudly into phones. Security guards watched from behind a granite desk that probably cost more than Loretta's annual rent. She walked to the reception counter with steady steps. I'm here to see Victor Harrow. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile, barely glanced up from her computer screen. Do you have an appointment? Tell him Loretta Bellamy is here. Now the woman looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes took in Loretta's simple dress, her worn purse, her calm expression. The smile became cooler. I'm sorry, but Mr. Harrow doesn't take walk-in meetings. He'll see me. Ma'am, I really don't think... Call him. Loretta's voice carried quiet authority. Tell him the hotel maid from the conference is here. He'll want to know why. The receptionist hesitated, then picked up her phone. She spoke in hushed tones, glancing at Loretta with growing confusion. After a moment, she hung up. 37th floor. Executive suite. They're expecting you. The elevator ride felt eternal. Loretta watched the numbers climb and forced herself to breathe slowly. She'd faced down bill collectors, hospital administrators, and social workers who thought poverty meant stupidity. Victor Harrow was just another man who confused money with intelligence. The elevator opened into a hallway lined with oil paintings and floor-to-ceiling windows. Through the glass walls of the corner office, she could see Victor behind a massive desk talking to Graham Pike. Both men turned as she approached. Victor's secretary, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, gestured toward the office door. "Mr. Harrow will see you now." Loretta entered the lion's den. Victor's office was everything she'd expected. Leather chairs, crystal awards, a view of the city that reminded visitors how high above everyone else he sat. Graham stood near the window, arms crossed, watching her like she might steal something. "Mrs. Bellamy?" Victor didn't rise from his chair. His smile was cold, predatory. "I have to admit, I'm surprised to see you here. Most people in your situation would be looking for their next job, not wasting time on lost causes." Loretta sat in the chair across from his desk, without being invited. She placed her folder carefully on her lap. "I'm here to make this simple for both of us, Mr. Harrow." "Oh, please do." Victor leaned back, clearly enjoying himself. "I assume you've come to apologize for disrupting my meeting and accept responsibility for the misunderstanding? I want 3 things." Loretta's voice was steady, professional. "First, I want the Halcyon Grand to correct my employment record. Second, I want compensation for the wages I've lost because of your interference with my job search. Third, I want a written apology acknowledging that I solved your logistics problem correctly." Graham snorted from his position by the window. "Lady, you've got some nerve." Victor laughed. Actually laughed. "That's adorable. You think you're in a position to make demands?" He gestured around his office. "Do you see where you are? Do you understand who I am?" Loretta opened her folder and placed a stack of papers on Victor's desk. Financial reports, routing charts, payment records for Pike Meridian Solutions. Victor's laughter died. "I also understand who you are, Mr. Harrow." Loretta's voice remained calm as Victor's face went pale. "The question is whether you understand who I am." Graham moved closer to the desk, his eyes fixed on the documents. "What is this?" "Your Birmingham routing problem wasn't an accident," Loretta said. "Someone's been creating artificial bottlenecks to force emergency transfers through preferred vendors. The same vendors getting paid twice for single shipments." Victor's jaw tightened. His confident mask was slipping. "You're making wild accusations about confidential business." "I'm stating facts." Loretta pointed to specific numbers on the reports. Pike Meridian Solutions received $2.7 million in emergency routing fees over the past 18 months. Every payment corresponds to a crisis that could have been avoided with proper scheduling. The room went silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of traffic below. Victor reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a leather checkbook. "How much?" "Excuse me?" "To make this go away." His voice was steady now, businesslike. "To sign a non-disclosure agreement and forget whatever you think you've discovered. Name your price." Loretta looked at the checkbook, then back at Victor's face. "You think this is about money?" "Everything's about money, Mrs. Bellamy. The sooner you learn that, the better off you'll be." Victor's pen hovered over the check. 50,000? 100? That's more than you'd make in 5 years cleaning hotel rooms. "Keep your money, Mr. Harrow." Victor's expression hardened. "You have no idea what you're walking into. Men like me survive accusations from people like you every day. We have lawyers, resources, connections. We know how to protect what's ours. Loretta stood and gathered her papers. And women like me have survived worse than you, Mr. Harrow. We know how to endure until the truth comes out. She walked toward the door, feeling both men's eyes on her back. This conversation never happened, Victor called after her. Loretta paused at the threshold. Every conversation happened, Mr. Harrow. That's what makes the truth so inconvenient. She stepped into the hallway, her heart pounding but her expression calm. The secretary watched her pass with curious eyes. Loretta pressed the elevator button and waited, conscious of the weight of the folder under her arm. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. As Loretta stepped inside, she heard quick footsteps behind her. Wait. Elise Varden, Harrowdine's chief legal officer, slipped into the elevator just before the doors closed. The older woman's silver hair was perfectly styled, her dark suit expensive and professional. She'd been in the conference room during Loretta's humiliation, but hadn't laughed with the others. Elise glanced at the elevator's security camera, then moved closer to Loretta. "Do not call me from your phone," she whispered, pressing a business card into Loretta's hand. "Ever." The elevator reached the ground floor. Elise stepped out first, walking briskly toward the parking garage without looking back. Loretta stood alone in the elevator, staring at the business card in her palm. The doors started to close, then opened again as someone else approached. She stepped into the lobby, her mind racing. Was Elise Varden offering help? Or was this another trap, another way for Victor to monitor and control her? The marble floors echoed with the sound of her footsteps as she walked toward the exit. Behind the reception desk, the young woman watched her leave with undisguised curiosity. Loretta pushed through the glass doors and emerged onto the busy sidewalk. The afternoon sun felt warm on her face after the artificial chill of Victor's office. She looked down at the business card again. Plain white paper. Elise's name and direct phone number. Nothing else? Milton's modest house felt smaller with 3 people hunched over his dining table. The overhead light cast sharp shadows across scattered documents, bank statements, and printed emails. Loretta sat with her back straight, the business card beside her elbow like a loaded weapon. She could be trying to help, Naomi said, picking up Elise's card for the 3rd time. Maybe she's been waiting for someone to expose Victor. Milton adjusted his reading glasses and shook his head. Lawyers don't risk their careers without a reason. Could be she wants to control the narrative before it gets away from her. Or she could be gathering information for Victor, Loretta said quietly. Learning what we know so they can stay ahead of us. Naomi set down the card with visible frustration. Mom, we can't keep waiting. Every day Victor has more time to destroy evidence. And every day we move too fast gives him more chances to bury us, Milton replied. He opened a small wooden box on the side table and pulled out an ancient flip phone. Been saving this for emergencies. Prepaid minutes, no connection to any of us. Loretta stared at the phone. You think I should call her? I think we need more information first, Milton said. Let's see what else we can find. Before anyone could argue, Naomi's phone buzzed with a message from Tessa. The text was short. Found something big. Can you talk? Naomi looked at her mother. Loretta nodded. The call connected immediately. Tessa's voice was tense, excited. I've been going through old messages, internal company chat logs. Victor knew about Birmingham months ago. Knew what exactly? Naomi asked, putting the call on speaker. The fraudulent routing. There's a message thread from March where Graham reports the Birmingham delays are running as designed. Victor responds with, Good. Keep the emergency fees flowing until quarter end. Milton leaned closer to the phone. That's conspiracy. Intentional fraud. It gets worse, Tessa continued. I pulled the vendor payment records. Pike Meridian Solutions received over $2 million in emergency routing fees this year alone. But here's the part that made me sick. Some of those payments came from budget line items labeled Pension reserve adjustments. Loretta felt the room spin slightly. Pension reserves? Money set aside for retired workers, Milton said grimly. Driver pension supplements, warehouse employee retirement funds, health care reserves. Tessa's voice cracked. I looked up some of the retirees. Mrs. Dorothy Hammond worked in our Louisville facility for 31 years. Her pension check was cut by 40% this spring because of market adjustments. There's no market adjustment, Loretta. They stole her money to pay Graham's brother-in-law. Naomi's hands clenched into fists. How many people? At least 300 retirees across 4 states, maybe more. Some of these people are in their 70s and 80s. They worked their whole lives expecting Harrodyne to honor their contracts. Milton was already pulling up Harrodyne's public retirement reports on his laptop. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, despite his age. Here, annual pension obligations decreased by 38% since January. They're calling it actuarial refinement. Theft, Loretta said simply. It's theft. The room fell silent except for the hum of Milton's old computer. Loretta stared at the scattered papers, but now they looked different. This wasn't just about her humiliation or even Victor's arrogance. Hundreds of elderly workers were living on reduced income because powerful men decided their dignity was worth less than quarterly profits. Tessa, Naomi said into the phone, can you prove the connection between the pension cuts and the Birmingham payments? I have spreadsheets, email threads, budget transfers, everything. But Loretta, they're getting suspicious. Graham asked me twice today why I was accessing old financial records. Milton looked at Loretta. This changes everything. We're not talking about corporate embarrassment anymore. This is criminal fraud affecting hundreds of families. Loretta thought of Mrs. Hammond, 31 years of loyalty rewarded with a 40% cut. She thought of all the other faces she couldn't see, all the people eating cheaper food and skipping medications because Victor Harrow needed to hide his incompetence. We have to go public, she said firmly, but not until the evidence is protected. Naomi picked up her laptop. Tessa, can you send everything to a secure server before they lock you out? Already working on it. I'm uploading the conference video first, then the financial records. If this goes viral, they can't delete it from the internet. Tessa's screen sharing showed a progress bar creeping toward completion. Loretta watched the percentage climb. 67, 72, 81. Each number represented proof that might save someone's retirement, someone's dignity, someone's hope. 96%, Tessa whispered through the phone. The bar reached 100%. Loretta's phone buzzed like an angry wasp against her nightstand. Then it buzzed again, and again. Mom. Naomi's voice cut through the darkness. Mom, wake up. You need to see this. Loretta sat up, blinking in the pale morning light filtering through her thin curtains. Naomi stood in the doorway holding her laptop, eyes wide with something between shock and triumph. What time is it? 6:30. The video went viral. Loretta's stomach dropped. What do you mean, viral? Naomi rushed to the bed and opened her laptop. The screen showed a local news website with the headline, Hotel Maid Solves CEO's Crisis, Gets Fired Instead. Below it, Tessa's video played on repeat. Loretta watched herself enter that conference room again. She saw Victor's cruel smile as he noticed her looking at the whiteboard. She heard his mocking voice. Careful. Stare at it too long, and you might embarrass yourself. Then came the moment that changed everything. Victor pointing at the board, his voice dripping with arrogance. If you can solve this, I'll give you my job. The comments section scrolled endlessly. Thousands of them. This woman is brilliant, and that CEO is a snake. Been a nurse for 20 years. Had doctors talk to me like this every single day. Worked maintenance at a law firm. Lawyers acted like I was furniture until their computers broke. She deserves that man's job. He deserves unemployment. Naomi clicked to Twitter. The hashtag #GiveHerYourJob was trending locally with over 15,000 mentions. People shared their own stories of being dismissed by bosses who thought uniforms meant stupidity. A retirement-age woman posted, "Cleaned offices for 30 years. The executives who treated me worst were always the ones who knew the least about their own companies." A truck driver wrote, "Lady knew more about logistics in 5 minutes than most shipping managers learn in 5 years." The phone rang. Loretta stared at the unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Bellamy, this is Channel 7 News. We'd like to schedule an interview about—" Loretta hung up. The phone immediately rang again. "This is the Halcyon Grand Hotel. We're calling to discuss your employment status." She hung up again. Naomi grinned. "They want you back. After they destroyed my record? After they let him humiliate me?" Loretta shook her head. "I'm not crawling back to beg for what they stole." The phone rang a third time. This time Loretta let Naomi answer. "This is attorney Maribel Knox with the Civil Rights Legal Clinic. I represent workers in cases involving workplace discrimination and retaliation. I'd like to speak with Mrs. Bellamy about her legal options." Naomi covered the phone. "Civil rights lawyer. She sounds legitimate." Loretta took the phone. "This is Loretta Bellamy. Mrs. Bellamy, I've watched the video. What happened to you is textbook workplace retaliation. You solved a problem. Your supervisor felt threatened, and he used his power to destroy your livelihood. We can fight this. I just want my record cleared and an apology. You deserve much more than that. This man damaged your reputation, cost you income, and violated federal employment protection laws. Let me help you get real justice." For the first time since Victor's cruel smile, Loretta felt something shift inside her chest. Not hope exactly, but possibility. "I'll call you back," she said. By noon, the local news trucks had found her apartment building. Loretta watched from her window as reporters set up cameras on the sidewalk. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, knocked to warn her about the crowd and offered to bring groceries so Loretta wouldn't have to leave. That afternoon, Milton arrived with a printout of Harrowdine's stock price. It had dropped 12% since morning. "Their board announced an internal review," he said, settling into Loretta's kitchen chair. "Stock analysts are asking questions about management competency." Naomi pulled up more news coverage on her phone. "Look at this. Harrowdine CEO under fire after mocking employee who solved crisis. They're not calling you a disgruntled maid anymore, Mom. They're calling you the employee who exposed executive incompetence." That evening, the three of them sat around Loretta's small kitchen table sharing takeout Chinese food. For the first time in days, the conversation didn't center on evidence or legal strategy. They talked about Naomi's classes, Milton's garden, Loretta's plans once this mess was over. "You know what feels different?" Loretta said, twirling lo mein around her fork. "People are finally seeing what happened instead of what he said happened." Milton raised his water glass. "To the truth, finding daylight." They clinked glasses as Loretta's phone buzzed with another interview request. Across the city, Victor Harrow stood in his penthouse living room watching Channel 7's evening coverage. The reporter stood outside Harrowdine headquarters describing growing questions about CEO leadership and corporate culture. Victor's jaw tightened as they replayed the conference room video again. His own voice echoed back at him. "If you can solve this, I'll give you my job." He grabbed his phone and dialed Graham Pike. "We have a problem. I'm watching the news. The board is asking questions. Marketing is fielding calls from—" "Shut up and listen," Victor snapped. "This narrative ends now. That woman is not some brilliant victim. She's a criminal who tried to extort us and leaked confidential information when we refused to pay. Make her look like what she is." Victor, the video shows. I don't care what the video shows. I care what the next video shows. Make her look like the criminal. Maribel Knox's law office occupied the third floor of a converted warehouse downtown. The exposed brick walls and tall windows gave it an honest, working-class feel that put Loretta at ease. She arrived Tuesday morning with Naomi and Milton, carrying a folder thick with evidence. Maribel was younger than Loretta expected, maybe 46, with silver streaks in her black hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd heard every excuse and seen every dirty trick. She wore a simple gray suit and kept her desk organized but not pristine. "Mrs. Bellamy," Maribel said, standing to shake hands, "I've been following your story since yesterday. What Victor Harrow did was textbook retaliation." They settled around a small conference table as Maribel poured coffee from a thermos. "Before we start, I want you to understand something. Men like Harrow don't fight fair. When public pressure mounts, they get desperate. We need to be ready for—" Her phone buzzed, then buzzed again. "Excuse me," Maribel said, glancing at the screen. Her expression changed. "This is unexpected." She opened her laptop and turned it toward Loretta. "Someone just forwarded me an email. They claim it's from you." Loretta leaned forward to read the message displayed on screen. From lbellamy4047@gmail.com to vharrowuharrowdine.com. Subject: Simple solution. "Mr. Harrow, I think we both know what I found on that whiteboard goes deeper than routing problems. $250,000 will buy my silence, and the only copies of certain financial documents. Otherwise, I take everything to the federal investigators asking questions about your pension fund transfers. You have 48 hours. L. Bellamy." The room went dead silent. "I didn't send this," Loretta said, her voice steady but strained. "I don't even have a Gmail account." Naomi grabbed her mother's arm. "Mom, you use your old Hotmail for everything." "I know what I didn't send," Loretta snapped, then immediately softened. "I'm sorry, baby, but this is fake." Milton studied the email timestamp. "Sent yesterday at 11:37 p.m. Where were you then, Loretta?" "Home with you and Naomi. We were watching the late news coverage." Maribel's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and answered immediately. "Knox Law?" "Yes, I represent her." "What do you mean withdrawing the offer?" Loretta watched Maribel's face tighten as she listened. "That's interesting timing," Maribel said coldly. "You fire her for solving your client's problem, then conveniently receive an extortion email the day she goes public." "I see. Yes, we'll be in touch." She hung up and turned back to Loretta. "The Halcyon Grand just withdrew their job offer. They claim they received a copy of the same email and can't risk employing someone under investigation for extortion." "Investigation?" Naomi's voice cracked. "Who's investigating?" Before Maribel could answer, her assistant knocked and entered without waiting. "Ms. Knox, Channel 7 is running breaking news. You need to see this." They crowded around the television as the anchor introduced a live segment. Victor Harrow appeared on screen, standing outside Harrowdine headquarters in an expensive Navy suit. He looked composed, reasonable, slightly wounded. "Yesterday I made a poorly worded comment that I deeply regret," Victor said, facing the cameras with practiced sincerity. "Humor has no place in professional settings, and I apologize to Mrs. Bellamy for any embarrassment. However, I cannot remain silent while my family and company are threatened with extortion." The anchor leaned forward. "You're alleging that Mrs. Bellamy attempted to blackmail Harrowdine?" "The evidence speaks for itself," Victor replied smoothly. "Mrs. Bellamy demanded $250,000 in exchange for her silence about confidential business information she obtained while performing janitorial services. When we refused to pay, she leaked edited video footage to damage our reputation." "Edited?" the anchor pressed. The video conveniently omits Mrs. Bellamy's demands for money and her threats to take private company data to federal investigators, Victor said. We're cooperating fully with law enforcement. Loretta sank into her chair as the report continued. Comments on social media began shifting. Maybe she really was trying to shake him down. Convenient timing on that video. Why would she have copies of financial documents? Naomi's phone buzzed. Then again. She looked at the screen and went pale. What is it? Loretta asked. Text from my academic advisor, Naomi whispered. The law school received an anonymous ethics complaint. They're saying I helped you blackmail a corporation and violated student conduct policies. Maribel cursed under her breath. They're attacking your daughter to pressure you. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Milton stood abruptly. I should go home. If they're willing to target Naomi, they might— No, Loretta said firmly. We stick together. They want us scared and scattered. But that afternoon, Milton called from his house, voice shaken. Loretta, there's a black sedan that's been parked across from my driveway for 2 hours. When I went to get my mail, the driver got out and took pictures. Call the police, Loretta said, and tell them what? It's not illegal to park on a public street. By evening, Milton's voice was strained with exhaustion when he called again. The car followed me to the grocery store. The man got out and walked behind me through every aisle. Didn't buy anything. Just watched. Loretta wanted to go to him, but Maribel advised caution. If they're surveilling him, they're probably watching you, too. At 9:47 p.m., Naomi's phone rang. Milton's neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was calling from the hospital. He collapsed in his driveway, she explained through tears. The paramedics think it's his heart. That man in the black car was still there when the ambulance came. At Regional Medical Center, Loretta sat beside Milton's bed in the cardiac unit. His face was gray against the white pillows, oxygen tubes in his nose, monitors beeping steadily. The doctor said stress had triggered an episode, but his condition was stable. This is my fault, Loretta whispered, holding his hand. I should have signed that paper and walked away. Milton's eyes fluttered open. Don't you dare, he wheezed. That man, in the parking lot, said you'd learn what happens to people who don't mind their business. Loretta's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Bellamy, this is Graham Pike from Harrow-Dine. Mr. Harrow would like to resolve this matter privately. Standard settlement agreement, public apology for the misunderstanding, mutual non-disclosure. Papers can be delivered tonight if you're ready to move forward. This offer expires at midnight. Loretta stared at the message as Milton's breathing gradually steadied and Naomi dozed in the visitor chair. Outside, snow began falling against the hospital windows, and Loretta felt the weight of everyone she'd dragged into Victor's crosshairs. The settlement papers felt heavy in Loretta's hands. 3 pages of legal language that boiled down to one thing: disappear and pretend Victor's cruelty never happened. She read the terms again in the dim hospital light. Public apology for misunderstanding the nature of a business discussion. Acknowledgement that the viral video was taken out of context. Agreement never to discuss Harrow-Dine, Victor Harrow, or any company employees. In exchange, $50,000, and a promise that no further legal action would be taken against her or her family. Milton's chest rose and fell steadily. The heart monitor beeped its rhythm. Outside the window, snow continued falling over the city, covering everything in clean white silence. Naomi stirred in the visitor chair, then sat up fully when she saw the papers. Mom, what is that? Loretta handed her the settlement offer. Naomi read quickly, her face hardening with each paragraph. You can't sign this, Naomi whispered fiercely. This is exactly what he wants. He hurts people then pays them to stay quiet about it. "Look at Milton," Loretta said quietly. "Look at what this fight cost him. Your scholarship is in jeopardy. They're following us, threatening us, making us targets." She touched Milton's hand gently. "How many more people get hurt before I admit I can't win against someone like Victor?" Naomi moved her chair closer. "Mom, you taught me that backing down from bullies only makes them stronger. You said that when I was getting picked on in middle school, remember? You said, if you let them win once, they'll keep coming back. That was different. Those were kids. This is a man with lawyers and private investigators and enough money to destroy us." Maribel arrived at 6 a.m. with coffee and grim news. She'd spent the night researching the forged email, consulting with digital forensics experts. "The message headers look authentic," Maribel explained, setting down the coffee. "Without access to Harrowdine's server logs, proving it's fake will be nearly impossible. They were smart about it. Used your real email address, sent it from an external server that mimics your provider's settings." Loretta felt something break inside her chest. "So they can frame me and I have no way to prove my innocence?" "Not without subpoena power. And getting a judge to order Harrowdine to preserve their internal communications?" Maribel shook her head. "That's a long shot, especially with Victor's legal team already claiming you're a blackmailer." Naomi paced to the window. "There has to be something. Someone who can help us." "There is," Loretta said quietly. "I can sign these papers. Victor gets his silence. You get your scholarship back. And Milton doesn't have any more men following him home." "Mom, no." "Yes." Loretta's voice was firm now, decided. "I've been selfish. I let pride put you both in danger. This ends today." Milton's eyes opened slowly. He looked at each of them, then at the papers in Loretta's lap. "What's that?" he asked, voice hoarse. Loretta explained the settlement offer. Milton listened without interrupting, his expression growing sharper despite his exhaustion. "You know what Victor stole?" Milton said when she finished. "It wasn't just contract money. Those pension funds belonged to warehouse workers who loaded trucks for 30 years. Drivers who missed their kids' birthdays to make deliveries. People like me who worked nights so their families could have better days." He struggled to sit up straighter. "That man didn't just mock you, Loretta. He stole food from retirees' tables, medicine money, Christmas presents for grandchildren." Milton's eyes were clear now, focused. "If you sign that paper, he keeps every stolen dollar and finds new ways to hurt the next person who threatens his secrets." Loretta looked at the settlement again. The words blurred as tears she'd been fighting finally came. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared he'll hurt you worse. I'm scared Naomi will lose everything she's worked for. I'm scared I'm not strong enough to fight someone with that much power." "You're the strongest person I know," Milton said simply. "But strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about doing what's right, even when you are afraid." At 7:30 a.m., Loretta and Naomi walked through the hospital parking garage toward their car. Loretta still carried the unsigned papers. Snow crunched under their feet, and their breath made small clouds in the cold air. The prepaid phone rang. Loretta almost didn't answer. She was tired of secrets and careful conversations and looking over her shoulder. But something made her press the green button. "Mrs. Bellamy?" It was Elise Varden's voice, urgent and breathless. "I've been trying to reach you all night. That email you supposedly sent demanding money? I can prove it was forged from inside Harrowdine. Graham Pike's assistant sent it using our internal servers, then tried to scrub the digital trail." Loretta stopped walking. "You have proof?" "Server logs, metadata, the original deletion commands, everything. But Victor's ordering a complete system purge this morning. If we don't preserve those records in the next few hours, the evidence disappears forever." Naomi was listening now, hope lighting her face for the first time in days. Loretta looked at the settlement papers one last time, then at her daughter's expectant expression. Then we stop him today. The library study room smelled like old books and industrial carpet. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in pale yellow. Loretta sat at the round table with her hands folded, still wearing yesterday's clothes. She had not slept much. Naomi pulled out a chair beside her mother, while Maribel Knox arranged legal folders with practiced efficiency. The civil rights attorney looked tired but determined, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. When Elise Vardon entered, she moved like someone expecting to be followed. Her expensive coat and designer handbag seemed out of place in the shabby room, but her expression was all business. "Thank you for coming," Elise said, sitting across from Loretta. "I know this is a risk for everyone." "Bigger risk to do nothing," Loretta replied quietly. Elise opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "I need you to understand something first. I have been investigating Victor Harrow for 8 months. Not because I suddenly developed a conscience, but because I discovered he was using company funds to pay personal legal bills and campaign contributions. I started digging deeper." She spread printouts across the table. Server logs, email headers, financial transfers. What I found was systematic theft. Pension money rerouted through fake emergency contracts. Vendor payments to shell companies owned by his friends and family members. But I could never prove Victor knew about the specific routing fraud until you solved that whiteboard problem. Loretta studied the papers. Numbers that had seemed abstract in the conference room now had names attached. Real people whose retirement accounts had been drained by a few $100s each month. Enough to matter to them, small enough that no one noticed the pattern. Graham Pike's assistant, Jennifer Walsh, sent that extortion email from her work computer at 3:17 a.m. last Tuesday. Elise continued. She used a Harrowdyne server to create a fake email account with your name. Then she tried to delete the digital trail, but our backup systems preserve everything for 60 days. Maribel leaned forward. "This proves the frame-up was coordinated from inside the company." "More than that," Elise said. "It proves they were terrified enough of what Loretta knew to commit multiple federal crimes trying to silence her." Naomi's phone buzzed with a video call notification. "It's Tessa." "Answer it," Loretta said. Tessa Monroe's face appeared on the small screen, pixelated but recognizable. She was calling from what looked like her car, parked in a garage somewhere. "Mrs. Bellamy, I wanted you to know I still have the original recording from the conference room. Not just the clip that went viral, but the full 40-minute video showing everything Victor said before and after you solved the problem." "What does the full version show?" Maribel asked. Victor admits he's been managing the Birmingham situation for months. He tells Graham they need to keep emergency fees flowing until the next quarterly report. Then, when Mrs. Bellamy exposes the fraud, he panics and starts making threats about what happens to people who embarrass him. Elise nodded grimly. That recording, plus these server logs, create a complete evidence chain. Victor knew about the fraud, profited from it, and retaliated against the whistleblower. "What's the next step?" Loretta asked. Naomi was already dialing another number. "My constitutional law professor, Dr. Martinez. She knows people in federal enforcement." While Naomi spoke quietly into her phone, Maribel began drafting emergency motions. "I can file for evidence preservation orders within the hour. That prevents Harrowdyne from destroying any more records." "It may be too late," Elise warned. Victor scheduled a complete system upgrade for tonight. Officially, it's routine maintenance. Unofficially, anything embarrassing disappears forever. Naomi ended her call. "Dr. Martinez is connecting us with a federal investigator who specializes in corporate fraud. She says if we can get the evidence to them today, they can freeze Harrowdyne's systems immediately." There's something else, Elise said. Victor is addressing the shareholders tomorrow morning. Emergency meeting to restore confidence after the video scandal. The board will be there, along with press and potential investors. She looked directly at Loretta. If we're going to expose him, that's our moment. Cameras, witnesses, federal observers. Everything public and recorded. Loretta was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Milton in his hospital bed, about the retirees whose pension money Victor had stolen, about every worker who had been silenced by powerful men who thought uniforms made people invisible. I'll do it, she said finally, but not as a victim begging for justice. As a witness who caught him stealing. The Harrowdine Auditorium buzzed with nervous energy as shareholders, board members, and reporters filled the tiered seating. Camera crews positioned themselves along the walls, their bright lights casting harsh shadows across the corporate stage. Victor Harrow stood behind the podium, his silver hair perfectly styled, his navy suit impeccable. He looked every inch the successful CEO who had built Harrowdine into a logistics empire, but his hands gripped the podium edges just a little too tightly. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering on such short notice, Victor began, his voice smooth and practiced. I want to address the unfortunate misunderstanding that has dominated our news cycle this week. He paused, allowing his expression to soften into what might pass for humility. A brief interaction with a hotel employee was taken completely out of context by social media. What appeared to be dismissive behavior was actually a moment of frustration during a high-pressure business crisis. I made a poorly worded joke, and I regret any offense it may have caused. Several board members nodded sympathetically. Gerald Whitman, the board chairman, sat in the front row looking relieved that Victor was handling the situation professionally. However, Victor continued, his tone hardening slightly, what began as a simple misunderstanding has escalated into something far more serious. We have discovered evidence suggesting this incident was orchestrated as part of an extortion attempt against Harrowdine. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Reporters leaned forward, sensing a story twist. The individual in question, Loretta Bellamy, sent demands for substantial financial compensation in exchange for keeping this manufactured controversy quiet. When we refused to pay, the video was released to damage our company's reputation. Victor gestured toward the screen behind him, where an email appeared. The message, supposedly from Loretta, demanded $250,000 to avoid further embarrassment for Harrowdine. This is not about workplace dignity or standing up to authority. This is about blackmail, pure and simple. We will not be intimidated by... Mr. Chairman. The voice cut through Victor's speech like a blade. Elise Varden rose from her seat in the front row, her black suit stark against the red auditorium chairs. Every camera in the room swiveled toward her. I object to these proceedings, Elise said, her voice carrying clearly without amplification. And I hereby resign my position as Chief Legal Officer of Harrowdine Logistics, effective immediately. The auditorium erupted. Gerald Whitman banged his gavel, calling for order. Victor's face went white, then flushed red. Elise, this is neither the time nor the place for... This is exactly the time and place, Elise interrupted. She opened a leather portfolio and began walking toward the stage. Because what Mr. Harrow just told you is a complete fabrication. She reached the front of the auditorium and turned to face the crowd. The email he showed you was created on a Harrowdine server by Graham Pike's administrative assistant. The metadata proves it was fabricated 2 days ago, not sent by Mrs. Bellamy weeks ago as claimed. Graham Pike, sitting 3 rows back, began typing furiously on his phone. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Furthermore, Elise continued, Mrs. Bellamy's analysis of our logistics crisis exposed systematic fraud involving vendor overpayments, pension fund manipulation, and deliberate routing inefficiencies designed to generate emergency fees for companies owned by Herodyne executives and their associates. Victor stepped away from the podium, his composure cracking. This woman is having some kind of breakdown. Security should... The evidence has already been submitted to federal investigators, another voice called out. Maribel Knox stood near the back of the auditorium, holding up a folder. Preservation orders were filed this morning, freezing all Herodyne servers and financial records pending investigation. The reporters were on their feet now, cameras flashing, voices shouting questions. Board members turned to each other in confusion and alarm. "You want to talk about context?" Elise raised her voice above the chaos. "Let's show them the full context." She nodded toward the projection booth. Tessa Monroe's unedited recording began playing on the massive screen behind Victor. The audio was crystal clear. The audience heard Victor's cruel laughter as he mocked Loretta. They heard his challenge. "If you can solve this, I'll give you my job." They watched Loretta's calm, brilliant analysis. And then they heard what came after: Victor's rage, his threats, his vindictive phone call to the hotel manager. "She should have stayed grateful," Victor's recorded voice echoed through the silent auditorium. Graham Pike was now texting with both hands, his face pale. Several board members were speaking urgently into their own phones. "This is ridiculous," Victor shouted, abandoning all pretense of control. "She's a hotel maid, a minimum wage worker with no credentials, no business education, no credibility whatsoever. Why are we even—" The auditorium doors opened with a soft whisper. Every head turned as Loretta Bellamy walked in, her daughter Naomi beside her. She wore a navy dress, her shoulders straight, her expression calm and determined. She moved down the center aisle with quiet dignity, while cameras tracked her progress. Victor fell silent, his mouth still open mid-sentence. Loretta walked steadily down the center aisle, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet auditorium. Cameras tracked her movement as reporters leaned forward, sensing the story was about to reach its peak. Victor remained frozen at the podium, his face shifting between rage and disbelief. He had expected many things, but not this. Not her walking into his territory with such calm authority. Naomi stayed close beside her mother, her law school training evident in the way she scanned the room for exits and allies. Board members whispered urgently among themselves, while federal observers took notes from the back rows. Loretta reached the front of the auditorium and paused. She looked up at Victor, then turned to address the audience directly. "My name is Loretta Bellamy," she said, her voice carrying clearly without amplification. "Mr. Harrow called me a hotel maid. He was right. That was my job." She stepped closer to the microphone that Elise had been using. "But being a maid doesn't make me stupid. And it doesn't make me blind." Victor found his voice. "This is absurd. Security needs to remove this woman immediately. She has no business—" "I have every business being here," Loretta interrupted, her tone sharp but controlled. "Because you made it my business when you dared me to solve your crisis. When you promised to give me your job if I could fix what your entire executive team couldn't figure out." The crowd murmured, remembering the viral video that had brought them all here. Loretta continued. "So let me tell you exactly what I saw on that whiteboard. What I solved. What you fired me for understanding." She moved with purpose now, her earlier hesitation gone completely. "Your Birmingham distribution center was being charged twice for the same freight transfers. Emergency overflow fees were going to Pike Meridian Solutions, a company owned by Graham Pike's brother-in-law. The same Graham Pike sitting right there, trying to delete evidence on his phone." Graham's face went white as every camera in the room swung toward him. He fumbled his phone, nearly dropping it. "The routing delays weren't accidental," Loretta explained. "They were deliberate. Expensive cargo was being sent through slower channels, so emergency contractors could collect inflated fees. Money that should have gone to your shareholders, your workers, your retirees? Victor tried to interrupt again. This woman has no proof of— The proof is in your own numbers, Loretta said firmly. The same numbers you put on that whiteboard. The same analysis you mocked me for understanding. She turned to face the board members directly. Your pension reserve fund shows payments to those same emergency contractors. Retirement money that belonged to warehouse workers, drivers, people who spent decades building this company. Money that was stolen and hidden in fake vendor payments. Board Chairman Gerald Whitman stood up. Mrs. Bellamy, these are serious accusations. Do you have documentation to support? She has everything, Elise called out, raising a thick folder. Server logs, payment records, routing manifests, pension transfers. All of it preserved and submitted to federal investigators this morning. The room erupted in shouting. Reporters fired questions. Board members demanded answers. Shareholders called for Victor's removal. Victor grabbed the podium microphone. This is a coordinated attack. She's just a hotel maid. A minimum wage worker with no credentials, no business education, no credibility whatsoever. The auditorium fell silent again. Loretta looked up at him with something that might have been pity. You're right, Mr. Harrow. I am just a maid. So let me ask this room full of educated, credentialed business leaders a simple question. She paused, letting the moment build. If I'm just a maid, then why did your CEO, a man paid millions of dollars to run this company, need a maid to find the truth he was supposed to protect? The silence stretched like a held breath. Then the room exploded. Shareholders shouted for Victor's resignation. Board members called for emergency votes. Reporters pushed toward the front, cameras flashing continuously. Through the chaos, Loretta heard the sound she had been waiting for: heavy footsteps and official voices. Federal agents! Nobody leave the building! 3 agents in dark suits entered through the main doors, badges visible, warrant papers in hand. More agents appeared at the side exits. Graham Pike bolted from his seat, pushing past other attendees toward a side door. He made it halfway before an agent stepped into his path. Graham Pike, you need to come with us. The board chairman was on his feet, gaveling for order. This meeting is suspended pending. Mr. Harrow, another agent called from the stage steps. We have a warrant for your arrest. Victor's face went from red to pale in seconds. He looked around the auditorium like a trapped animal, seeing cameras, federal agents, board members who suddenly wouldn't meet his eyes. This is a mistake, he said into the microphone, his voice cracking. I built this company. I saved thousands of jobs. You can't— Sir, step away from the podium, the agent said calmly. The last thing Loretta heard from the microphone was Victor's voice, no longer smooth or controlled, shouting about lawyers and conspiracies as agents escorted him away. Outside the auditorium windows, she could see news vans and camera crews capturing every moment of his departure. Victor Harrow was losing the job he had once used to mock her. 3 months later, Loretta stood in the doorway of a bright classroom that smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating rows of tables arranged in a gentle semicircle. Each table held notebooks, pens, and a small placard that read, Your experience matters here. The Bellamy Second Chance Institute occupied the entire 3rd floor of a renovated office building downtown. The whistleblower reward money had been substantial. Public donations poured in after Victor's arrest made national news, but the largest contribution came from Harrowdine's court-ordered restitution fund. Money clawed back from fraudulent accounts and returned to harmed workers. Loretta smoothed her navy blazer and checked the wall clock. Her first class would start in 20 minutes. Behind her, Milton wheeled in a cart of training materials. His recovery had been complete, though he moved more carefully now. His cardiologist said the stress was gone from his system. Apparently, watching corrupt executives get arrested was excellent medicine. "Nervous?" he asked, arranging handouts on the tables. "Excited," Loretta said. "There's a difference." Through the windows, she could see the Halcyon Grand Hotel 6 blocks away. The hotel had issued a public apology 2 weeks after Victor's arrest. Corporate ownership flew in from Atlanta to personally clear Loretta's employment record and offer her the general manager position Dennis Calder had lost. She had politely declined. Dennis learned that morning about his termination while watching the news coverage of Victor's perp walk. The hotel's new management explained that employees who buckled under pressure from corrupt clients were liability risks the company could not afford. Naomi entered carrying a box of welcome folders. The ethics complaint against her had been dismissed within hours of Graham Pike's confession. Her law school not only reinstated her scholarship, but offered her a work-study position researching corporate accountability cases. The afternoon group confirmed 15 more students, Naomi said, setting down the box. That brings today's total to 43. 43 people. Hotel housekeepers, hospital orderlies, truck drivers, former retail managers, displaced factory workers, and caregivers returning to work after years at home. Ages ranged from 38 to 67. Most had been told they were too old, too inexperienced, or too set in their ways to change careers. Loretta had designed the program with Maribel's legal guidance and Elise's corporate insight. Students spent 6 weeks learning systems analysis, project management, quality control, and workplace advocacy. More importantly, they learned their experience managing households, caring for family members, solving problems with limited resources, and staying calm under pressure were exactly the skills modern employers needed. The program guaranteed job placement support. Maribel negotiated partnerships with companies required to hire a percentage of second-chance graduates as part of legal settlements. Elise, now running her own employment law practice, provided free consultation on workplace rights. Tessa managed the Institute's technology and social media outreach. She had left Harrowdine after receiving death threats from Victor's remaining supporters, but her whistleblower testimony earned her respect in corporate ethics circles. 3 companies had offered her director-level positions. She chose to work with Loretta instead. "We matter more than our paychecks," Tessa often told reporters. "Mrs. Bellamy taught me that." On the classroom's main wall hung a large framed photograph. Not the viral video of Victor's mockery, not the moment of Loretta's firing. Instead, the image showed Loretta standing at the whiteboard, marker in hand, moments before she solved what Victor could not. Her expression was calm and focused. Her posture showed quiet confidence. She looked like exactly what she was. Someone who belonged in that room, solving that problem, proving her worth. Below the photograph, gold lettering spelled out the Institute's motto: "Experience is expertise. Dignity is earned. Opportunity is demanded." At 9 o'clock, students began entering. A former hotel night manager. A woman who had spent 12 years caring for her disabled husband. A retired postal worker. A grocery store supervisor laid off during corporate restructuring. Each carried a manila folder and cautious hope. Loretta watched them choose seats, introduce themselves quietly, and glance around the bright room with expressions she recognized. They looked like people who had been told to be grateful for whatever scraps were offered. People who had been judged by their uniforms instead of their abilities. People like her. When the last student settled, Loretta moved to the front of the classroom. She picked up a marker, the same brand she had used at Harrowdine's whiteboard. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had silenced Victor's boardroom. "Welcome to your second chance." A woman in the front row raised her hand tentatively. "Mrs. Bellamy? I worked in a nursing home for 15 years before they closed our wing. I'm worried I don't have the right background for business training. Several other students nodded. A man added, I drove delivery trucks for 23 years. Never worked in an office. Loretta smiled and turned to write on the clean whiteboard behind her. Let's begin with the mistake they always make, she said, marker moving across the smooth surface. They confuse your job with your worth. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.